restoring something, whether it's restoring houses or cars or machinery in some way. They have them around, and they get this house that's all broken down, or maybe they bring in this machine or this car that's all rusted out and everything, and then they bring it to these experts, professionals who know how to do all this stuff, and they take it and they replace all the parts, and they're painting it and cleaning it up and doing all this stuff, and at the end of the show, they show it to you, and it's almost like it's brand new again. And they know all the tricks, they have all the expertise, and they can do all this kind of stuff, and they make it look real good. And some of us maybe could try to do it and maybe watch some YouTube videos or something and try to get it to look good, but it's never going to look quite as good or quite as new as it does when you get someone who really knows what they're doing. So who's really been trained and knows, like I said, an expert, knows all the tricks and all that. One thing that our family has is we have a membership at Greenfield Village, and each year they have like an old car show, and it's fun to take the boys and go there and see all these cars and things that are 100 years old almost, but they put so much time into it and effort into it, and they almost look like they're brand new, like they just came off the assembly line or something. And someone who really knows what they're doing, they can put this time into it and make it look better. As after time goes by, these things start getting damaged, they start decaying, and could just be from time going by that can't help it. I mean, think of a car or whatever. Try to stop a car from rusting. It's pretty hard to do that. It's just time happens. Or sometimes just things happen. You ever seen a building, like an old store, and all of a sudden it moves out and it's empty, and it doesn't take that long, and all of a sudden the grass starts growing up all over the parking lot and all around the building, and the building starts falling apart, it looks like, and windows break, and it's not that much time that goes by before that starts to happen. Or even going by and seeing a house that had burned down or something like that, or flood damage, things like that. It really can do a lot to hurt these things, whether it's a house or cars or machines, whatever. But again, you put it in the right hands, get it in someone who knows what they're doing, and they're able to repair those things. You look at it and think, wow, how could anyone ever do this? How can anyone ever repair this? But in the right hands, they're able to do it, and they're able to restore it and make it look like, I said, almost like it was new again. So there's a quick video we're going to watch, just a real short video, but it was interesting. A house that had burned, and it's just one of those time-lapse videos showing all the work they're doing to try to restore it and fix it up, and I thought it was interesting. So let's watch that here for a minute. So the house had burned, obviously. We all saw that, and thought it was interesting what they had to do to it, because to repair it and rebuild it, they had to tear all this down. We could see they went almost all the way down in the foundation and tore all this stuff down. Even on the back side of the house where it didn't look like it had really burned, they still had to take it all down and tear it all down to rebuild it. But then you put it in the hands of people who know what they were doing. Obviously the construction crew who knew what to do. They got all the burned, all the bad out, and then started rebuilding it and started putting it back together. And they were working on it, getting the walls back up and the siding and the roof and all that. But not only did they start rebuilding it, what was kind of interesting, they even improved it a little, didn't they? They added on that little room on the back and looked like they maybe put a porch on that wasn't there before. So you put it in the right hands, someone who knows what they're doing, and they can restore that house and make it look almost new again, and even improve it on what it was before it had the fire. And why I wanted to show that is because I thought, in a way, it's kind of similar to how we are. Because sometimes we mess up and we make mistakes and we allow sin into our life. And that sin tears at us and pulls away at us and is breaking us down if we don't get it out of our life. But that sin pulls us down and is trying to destroy us. And sometimes it can be a slow process, like over the course of time, that rust that creeps into the car, the machines, or the grass and the wind and all that is slowly breaking down a house. Sometimes it's fast, like a fire that destroyed it, or a flood that comes in and just overwhelms us. But when we realize it's there and we realize we need to get it fixed, we have a choice of how we're going to do it. We can try to go do it ourselves and try to get rid of that sin and try to fix it and improve ourselves by ourselves. And it's not so dissimilar to trying to look up a YouTube video on how to do it. You know, if your house burned down and you need to rebuild, you're going to go look up a YouTube video on how to clean up a house and rebuild it, or are you going to go get some experts who can do it? And that sin in our lives, when we try to handle it on our own, it's like trying to look up the YouTube video to rebuild a burned out house. Instead, we need to find the expert. Who's the expert? It's God. See, God, you put that burned out, broken life into God's hands, and God can rebuild us and make us to be like new. And even, like the house, make us better than we were before when we put ourselves in His hands. And those experiences that we go through, these difficult times, the struggles, even when they're of our own doing, they're not enjoyable to go through, but God can take them and He can work with them in our life, and He can improve us and get us to get past them and make us even better than we were before. And so just like the house that we were watching here, that it was broken and torn down, the Bible is full of imperfect and broken people as well. And going through the Bible, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in there who doesn't have, as part of their story, a way where they were down, where they had made mistakes, where they had let sin in. Just about everyone that you've looked through in the Bible has some parts about how they failed and they didn't live up to what God wanted from them. But what's important to see is that in all these cases, even when they have messed up, even when they have had sin in their life, God didn't abandon them, and God didn't turn His back on them, and God didn't forget about them. God still stayed with them. And like I said, you can find almost anyone you want in the Bible and find this pattern. And a couple of them I put up there, Moses and Peter and Paul. And look at their lives. Moses, he was growing up and he was in the Egyptian royal court. And then he sees this Egyptian who's treating a Hebrew poorly, beating him. And Moses kills the man and runs. So Moses has this murder in his background. And yet, down the line, quite a few years later, God comes back to Moses and uses Moses to come back to Egypt and to lead Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Even though he had this murder and this mistake that he had in his background. And then not only does he lead him out of Egypt, God then uses Moses, He gives Moses the law in the Old Testament, and Moses passes it on to Israel. And the ways that God interacted with Moses when you read his story, and the ways that God made Himself known to Moses, are unlike almost anyone else in the Bible. The way that God communicated with him and talked to Moses. And even though he had this murder that he had committed, God didn't forget about him. God still used him to do these amazing things and communicated with him in ways that very few people in the Bible recorded as communicating like that. Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, we know the story of how after Jesus was arrested, before he was crucified, that Peter is approached and asked if he was one of those guys who was with Jesus, and Peter denies it and says, "No, I don't know him. I wasn't with him." And not only does it happen just once, but it happens 3 separate times. So Peter makes that choice 3 times to deny that he was with Jesus and deny knowing Jesus. And in spite of that, 3 different times that he said he wasn't with Jesus, he didn't know him. After Jesus comes back and he's risen from the dead, he goes and seeks out Peter and tries to restore that relationship with Peter. And then Peter, after Jesus leaves and goes back to heaven, Peter is one of the key influential people who is helping to spread the gospel around, spread that story of Jesus. Paul as well, in a similar way. Before Paul came to know Jesus, when he was known as Saul, many of us know how he went around seeking out and hunting down Christians to arrest them or to kill them, and very anti-God. And yet when he came to know God, his life turned around. And now we know Paul as this great missionary who went all around that part of the world, all around that Mediterranean part of the world, teaching people about God and spreading the gospel, and wrote half of our New Testament. All comes from his writings. So all 3 of these men, and again, many others you could look at in the Bible, they made mistakes, and often big mistakes. These aren't just little things like, you accidentally stole something or walked out of the store, forgot something was in your pocket, or you told a lie, or something like that. I mean, these are often big mistakes. But God still was able to use them for great things. And what's interesting is, in all 3 of these men, if we were to ask you, okay, what do you know about Moses or Peter or Paul? And you start listing off the things that you know about their life, you'll get to the mistakes they made eventually. But is it going to be the first thing you say, or the second, or maybe even the third thing? You probably not. You'll probably start naming off a lot of these other accomplishments they had. And you will get to the mistakes eventually, because that's a part of their life. And that is part of their story. But it's not what they're known for. They're not known for those mistakes. They're instead known for the great ways they allowed God to use them. You ever watched a good mystery movie, or one of those movies that have a real good twist ending, and you watch it and you get real surprised and shocked at the end that was the mystery or that was the twist? And then if you watch it again a second time, and then that second time you're watching it, all these little clues that were all throughout the movie start showing up to you, and they start making sense, and you start to see, oh, this was pointing me at the answer, but I didn't recognize it. And you watch it again, and you see how all these little clues that they've put all through the movie are all kind of hinting and pointing you in the right direction, but because you didn't know what the ending was yet, you didn't quite recognize it. And you might even be thinking, could I not see this? They had it here, and they were telling me the answer, and I didn't even recognize it. But it's because you know the ending that you can see that now. And here's the thing with these 3 men and the other people that are in the Bible, we know their whole story. We can see where they started at and what they went through and the mistakes they made and the successes they had and the ways that God used them. And we see all the way to the end of their story, and we can see the whole thing. So it's like going to look at that movie we were just talking about, and you can see how all the things work together, and the way that God used the mistakes to help them in the future, and the ways that even though they messed up, they still let God use them. And we can see everything all together, and we recognize it. But when we look at those around us, the problem is we don't see the end of that story, do we? Because the end of the story hasn't been written yet. We look at the people around us, and all we see is whatever the last thing that we know about them, good or bad. We see someone who did something good, or they're serving God, and we look at them, wow, they're a great person, see how they're serving God. Or we see this sin that they've allowed in their life, or this bad thing they've done, this mistake they've made, and that's what we let them paint everything we think about them as. The person is really struggling, and they're turned away from God. And we see, whatever the last thing is we know about them, that's what's right in front of us, and that's what we see, because we don't see the whole story like we do with these people from the Bible, Peter or Moses or Paul. And the problem with that is we all have sin, don't we? We all make mistakes. But for some of us, it's just a little more visible than others. See, for some of us, the sins that we struggle with, the things that we really have a problem with, because we all have things that we are struggling with. It's not the same for all of us. We all have different things, but we all have something that we struggle with, don't we? And for some of us, it's just that it's more private. It's not so easily seen by those around us. But on the other hand, some of us, the things that we struggle with, it is easily seen by others. And so people see them struggling with that, and they start to turn away from them. They say, oh, that everything they think about them is painted by that sin. And we sometimes even go and start to turn our backs on that person and turn away from them and push them away because we just see that sin and we don't see anything else about them. We don't see how God could maybe use them if in the future. We don't see the ways that God can still take that sin and use it to make them better, just like the video we watched. All we can see is that sin and the way that they've turned away from God and mistakes that they've made. So let's look at that scripture up here that we read earlier from 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 5 through 11. And it says, "But if any have caused grief, he hath not grieved me, but in part, that I may not overcharge you all. Sufficient to such a man is this punishment which was inflicted of many, so that contrariwise ye ought rather to forgive him and comfort him, lest perhaps such a one should be swallowed up with overmuch sorrow. Wherefore I beseech you that you would confirm your love toward him. For to this end also did I write, that I might know the proof of you, whether ye be obedient in all things. To whom ye forgive anything, I forgive also. For if I forgave anything, to whom I forgave it, for your sakes forgave I it in the person of Christ, lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices." Now, I know that passage is a little confusing to hear sometimes, but I think we need to notice that forgiveness and comfort and love that it's talking about. And then the other verses there, Galatians 6:1. "Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted." So think about the ways that we usually react when we see someone make a mistake and mess up and sin. And often we want to abandon them or leave them behind or turn away. And we said all those things that we just see that sin and that's all we notice about them. But think about those verses and how God said that we should be treating those people. And the words that were in that scripture. In 2 Corinthians, it talked about forgiveness. And it talked about comfort. And it talked about love. And in Galatians, it talked about restoration. And it talked about gentleness. And those verses didn't say anything about forgetting them. Didn't say anything about turning your back on them. It didn't say anything about making them earn their way back or anything like that. It says that we need to be forgiving. We need to show them forgiveness. That we need to comfort them and welcome them and tell them, hey, I know you messed up, but it's okay. We can get through this. That we need to make sure that they know that we love them with a godly love. Not to show up and beat them down or anything, but to show them, hey, God cares about you, I care about you. I want to help you get through it. And that verse in passage in Corinthians says the reason we need to do that is so Satan can't get a hold of them. We were just talking about a movie. Think about lots of movies and TV shows. It's a classic storyline that they use where one character is shunned or turned away from the group. And then later on, down the line, that character shows back up, and now they got in with the wrong crowd or the bad guys or whatever it is. And now they're a part of the bad people or whatever it is, or the wrong crowd. Because they got turned away from where they were and got denied from where they were. And they were seeking out anyone who would accept them. And the bad crowd accepts them in, and they get caught up in that. And that's what Satan is looking to do. When we turn our backs on people because they've made a mistake, when we've turned them away and pushed them away and say that they're not worthy anymore or whatever it is, people are looking for someone to accept them. And Satan's too willing to stand there and say, hey, I'll accept you. Come on in. I won't worry about your flaws and the mistakes. Come on, come over here, and I'll help you out. And Satan is a liar, a master liar, isn't he? And he's able to twist that and get people to feel like they're going to be accepted when really he's there to destroy them even further and tear them down even more. And when we turn our backs to them, we're just pushing them away into Satan. And in Corinthians, Paul is writing here and saying, you got to be forgiving. You got to make sure they know that you still love them and comfort them and help them, and make sure they know that they're still accepted, so that they don't go out seeking out something else to be accepted by. They don't go seeking Satan to be accepted. But not only are we supposed to be loving and forgiving them and comforting them, like it says in Corinthians, but that verse in Galatians says that we also need to come along and help them. Help them get back to God. Help that relationship get restored. And help them in a gentle way, in a kind way, in a loving way. We're not drill sergeants dictating and demanding to them that they need to do something, but to come alongside of them and to say, hey, it's okay. You made a mistake, but I still care about you. And I still want to be along here with you. And let's go together and let's try to get it right and let's try to get it out of your life. And let's work together and get back towards God here. And gently do it. Because none of us want to be yelled at or screamed at or anything or dictated to and telling us what we need to do and not do and telling us that we made a mistake. We know we made a mistake, didn't we? When you make a mistake, you know it. So you don't need someone else coming along beside you yelling at you about it. What you need is someone to come alongside you and say, hey, I know you messed up, but we can fix it. I'll help you do it. Let me help you along the way and do it. And it can be hard for us because on both sides, because when we are the ones that make the mistake, usually we don't like admitting that we made a mistake and we need help, do we? So we don't really want to allow people in. But often we don't want to be the one to go along to help either, do we? We're often too satisfied to just say, hey, I'll pray for you, and then go around the other way. Don't let me get involved. I'll pray for you from a distance. Just don't ask me to help you. Often we are too willing to do that, aren't we? It's a lot easier to just say, hey, I'll pray for you, and move along. And not step in and say, okay, I will pray for you, but what else can I do for you? Can we open the Bible together and read the Bible together? Can I call you and make sure you're doing okay? Can I call you and make sure that you haven't fallen back into the sin? Can I help you get to church? Maybe you need a ride, or maybe you need someone to encourage you and make sure you're coming. Can I just send you a text or a phone call, whatever, sometimes, and just let you know, hey, I'm thinking about you and I'm praying about you? See, that's what God is saying here. We're not just supposed to say, hey, I know you made a mistake, and forgive them and show love, and then just forget about them and push it away and say, well, hopefully you can figure that out. Hope you can figure that out. But instead, come alongside and say, hey, I'd love to help you. And you can't force people, obviously, can you? If they don't want help, that's one thing. You can't make someone let you in. But you can still make sure you're there and still be willing to let them know that you're praying for them and that you're willing to help if they need it. How much effort does it take to send a text every now and then and tell someone, still here and I'm willing to help if you need it. Or I've just been thinking about you and I'm praying about you right now. It only takes a minute to do, but it lets someone know that you care about them, and it lets someone know that you love them and that you're not holding that mistake against them, and that that's not the only thing you're seeing about them, that you want to be a part of their life and you want to be in it. But that, like I said, that's often not what we do, is it? Usually we just see that mistake, and that's all we really see. And we don't see anything else about them. And that mistake is just right in front, that sin or whatever it is right in front, and we don't stop and look at what their purpose is in Christ and the whole thing, the whole story that God has for them. And God has made us and prepared us to do something for Him and to serve Him, and that goes for everyone. And instead of seeing, okay, what purpose does God have in this? What does God have this person do, and how can I help them get back to it? We just see that mistake, and we don't see anything else, and we don't want to move past that. So if someone does have a mistake, how should we react? How should we help them out? Well, like we said, we obviously need to be loving and forgiving and comforting. But we also, it's important to know we need to make sure we don't approve of their sin or tell them that that sin is okay, they did that, and you know, that's all right. You know, it's one thing to be forgiving and to be understanding and wanting to help them out and make sure, but at the same time, don't let them think that you think that sin is okay, that they did it. Because it's not okay, but that just means we don't have to hold it against them. We don't have to define their life by it. As always, God or Jesus gives us good examples, doesn't He? And there's many examples in the Bible, but a couple of them I wanted to highlight. There's a story where Jesus comes to a well and there's a Samaritan woman there. And probably most people know the story. And Jesus is talking to her, and it comes up that this woman has had several different husbands, and she's currently in a relationship that's sinful. And how does Jesus react? Does He yell at her, scream at her, tell her she's wrong, tell her that she's sinful? No, he's loving, He's forgiving. He tells her, hey, you know you're in this relationship, and it's not what you should be doing. But it's okay. You can get past it. You can make it right. You can come to God. Jesus doesn't condemn her in any way or tear her down or anything. But He's, just as we said, loving and forgiving and comforting her and showing her how she can fix it and how she can get restoration. But He never tells her that relationship is okay. He makes sure she knows that's something that needs to be fixed, but He does it in a loving way. And another one that we probably mostly know is there's a woman that's caught in the act of adultery. And the religious leaders bring her to Jesus, and they tell him that, hey, this woman was caught and all that. And according to the law, she's supposed to be stoned. And then what does Jesus do? You know, the famous line, the one that has no sin, he can cast the first stone at her. And then everyone slowly starts putting their rocks and their stones away, or down, and then they walk away, right? And so in the story, it's just Jesus and this woman left. And again, does Jesus yell at her, scream at her, tell her she was wrong, anything like that? No. Instead, he's loving to her and forgiving to her. But what's important is the line he says at the end, and he tells her to go and sin no more. He's telling her, yes, you were sinful. That is not something you need to be involved in. That's not acceptable. But go, put it behind you, move forward. Get it out of your life, but you can go forward. It doesn't have to be everything you're known for. Because if that woman was stoned, then what? That was what she was going to be known by, right? The woman that was caught in adultery, she was killed for it. That's how she was going to be remembered. But Jesus is showing her, you don't have to be remembered for that. You don't have to let that define you. Get it rid of it, get it out of your life, move past it. Don't let it stay there. It's sin, but move past it and keep going. And so, just like that, in all these instances and many other times, Jesus is always showing people that they have the sin, that they need to get out, but those mistakes don't have to be everything they're about. They can keep going. They can keep moving forward. They can leave those mistakes in the past. And so when we come into contact someone in our family, someone in our church, wherever, who's made mistakes, we need to use these examples of Jesus and how we're treating them. Are we forgiving? Are we accepting them back into fellowship? Are we showing them love, not accepting their sin, but accepting them back in and letting them know that we still care about you? You know, treating them like they're a human. Because so often we get to that point, don't we? We're pushing people away and we don't even treat them like they're a human anymore because of that mistake they made. Are we still treating people like they're human? Are we still loving them, forgiving them, willing to help them out, willing to get them past it? Because that's what we need to do when we come into contact with these people and when we have people in our life who have problems. You know, it's just the easy way, and it goes with so much in your life. Just think about your own life. And because we've all made mistakes, haven't we? And we've all screwed up, and we've all had sin. And hopefully we've been able to move past it with God's help. But think about the mistakes you made, especially some of you who maybe have some life experience behind you and had some mistakes you've made. You wanted that mistake you made when you were a teenager or you're a young person to define you the whole rest of your life? Or are you glad that you were able to move past it and able to move forward and maybe able to get it out of your life? And so when you see someone who's made a mistake, think about that. You didn't want it to define your life. They don't want it to define their life. So how can you be an example of Jesus, an example of God in their life, and help them get past it, and help them move forward, and help them get that sin behind them? Again, not approving of it, and not saying it's okay to have that sin in their life, but to lovingly show them and walk with them forward to get back to God and get that relationship right with Him again. You don't have to just leave them in their mistakes and turn your back and go forward, but bring them along with you. Because, as we said, those mistakes often can help us as we move forward. In your own life, the sin that you've had or the problems you've had before, you can probably take those and learn from them and use them and have used them in your life as you've gone forward in serving God. And be able to take those experiences you've had, even though they were bad experiences, and be able to take them and use them serving God going forward. And use them for good instead of remembering them for bad. Just like, again, the video, as we mentioned, the way they were able even to improve the house from where it was before. They took that bad experience and able to spin it for good. We can take those experiences we've had, learn from them, and use them for good as we help others. And we can say, hey, I went through this. I had this problem in my life. I made this mistake. And you know what? I was able to get past it. God helped me get through it. God helped me get better because of it. So let me come along with you, and we can do this together. And I can be a friend for you, and I can be a help for you, an encouragement for you as you're getting through this, so that it doesn't have to define you. All of us that are here, our story, the story of our life, is not finished yet because we're still here, right? So as we go forward, we have a choice to go towards God or go somewhere else. If you've had a mistake, we've had the choice. Are we going to let that be the defining part of our life, or are we going to move past it? And when we see the others who've made mistakes, their story's not finished yet either, is it? We can be there to help them move forward. So that just like Paul and Moses and Peter and those that we were talking about, and we look back at their whole life, and we can see how they made mistakes, yeah, but God still used them. We can be someone who can help someone along in that path as well. So that when they look back on their life, or someone else is looking at their life, they can see that those mistakes they had wasn't everything they were known for. They could see someone who came along with them and showed them some love and forgiveness that most people weren't, so that they can be restored to God, their relationship with God. And you know, as I said, you can't always force it. You can't make someone allow you in. You can't make someone let them help you. And sometimes people are just don't want to move forward, right? They want to stay stuck in that sin. There's not much we can do. But we need to be able to at least be there, and we need to be able to let them know, hey, I still care about you. I'm not going to hold this against you. I'd be happy to help you move forward if you want it. And this restoration, this forgiveness, this love is available to all of us. God makes it available to all of us. And if you don't have God in your life and you don't understand what it means to be forgiven like this, be happy to help explain it to you, what exactly it means to have God in your life, how you can have God in your life after the service or at the end of the service when we have a time of invitation. We'd be happy to have someone explain it to you a little more. But you have to have God before you can do it. And if you do have God already, are you being that example to those around you? Is there someone who's maybe has sin in their life right now, close to you? And what are you doing about it? Have you pushed them away and denied them and turned away from them and abandoned them? And again, sometimes there's people who aren't willing to change from their sin, and sometimes you have to make some hard choices. But what are you doing? Or are you willing to show them the forgiveness and love that God does and willing to come and help them out and walk them through it? God, we come to you again, and we just thank you for forgiveness that you offer.